Hi everyone, welcome to our sentence structure specifically for our IELTS writing lesson today. This is part of the IELTS Grammar Masterclass course, so welcome, it's great to have you with us for this one. Sentence structure is so important and we'll look at that in detail today. So if you are practicing for IELTS, maybe you're not so sure on the writing side, then this is the lesson for you. We'll go through all the different sentence structures as well as understand the basic elements of the sentence, and then hopefully by the end you will feel confident in this area. Okay, let's kick things off then with what do we actually mean by this term sentence structure? Well, this is referring to the way in which words are arranged, how they're organised, how they are ordered, if you like, to form a grammatically correct and meaningful sentence. So like everything in grammar, it's really important how you arrange the words, how they fit together, and this affects the meaning and the correctness as well. So words, phrases and clauses are organised together to convey thoughts and ideas effectively. If you were to just scramble all of the words, I might understand a little bit of what you're saying, perhaps, but you really want to convey your thoughts effectively and confidently, and so sentence structure is something to feel confident in order to do that. So there's various different elements, and before we talk about the sentence structure, we're actually going to talk about these elements first, so that when we then dive into the 4 different structures, we will understand the breakdown of it. Okay, so let's quickly look at the basic elements in a sentence. Before we can think about structure, let's think about, well, what actually goes into a sentence. We will be talking about independent clauses. What are they? Well, they can stand alone, so it gives you a clue in the name. They are independent, they have a subject and a verb, and it's a complete thought or idea. For example, I like spaghetti. Subject I, verb like, object spaghetti. You can also have a sentence that's just a subject verb as well, but you can include the object. So for example, he reads many books. He is the subject. Reads is the verb, matching the subject. Remember our subject-verb agreement there. And then many books, the object, but you can omit, in this case, many books, and just say he reads, and that would be a full independent clause. A dependent clause, on the other hand, well, this is not a complete sentence. It must be paired with an independent clause to become complete. And we will use dependent clause and subordinate clause interchangeably with one another. So just to be sure of the terminology here, it's important to double check that we are aware of these words and what they mean. So a dependent clause could be, although I like spaghetti. Now we have the elements of an independent clause, I like spaghetti, but because we've added this although, and we'll look at this a bit later in more detail, this now becomes a dependent clause, and we have our ellipsis there, the 3 dots, showing that this thought now needs to be completed. It's sort of hanging in the air. Because he reads many books. So again, the inclusion of because at the beginning here creates this dependent clause. We no longer have a complete thought. It is waiting now to be completed. Subject and predicate. So what do we mean when we talk about this? Well, every sentence has a subject, which is the main actor or the doer of the action, and a predicate, the action or what happens. So this is important terminology. For example, she is the subject, plays the piano is the predicate there. My sister and her friends, subject, plural, went to the movie theatre in town, predicate. So I'm sure we've covered this in the course, but just to freshen up, refresh before we dive into the structures, these are really important to make sure that we all understand. Okay, verb. What is a verb? Well, this expresses what the person, animal, place, thing, or concept does. So person, animal, place, thing, concept, nouns in other words. What is that noun or those nouns, plural? What are they doing? What action is being performed? So a verb can be known as a doing word. That fits for a lot of verbs, but there's many different types of verbs. We have a lesson going into that if you want to learn a bit more. But for today, we'll just view them as the doing, the action word. So for example, although I like spaghetti, so this is a dependent clause. We've still got a verb though here, like. Because he reads many books, the verb reads. So a verb is essential in the sentence. It cannot be a clause or a sentence without one. It's the core, if you like. Phrases then, what do we mean when we talk about phrases? Well, they are groups of words that function as a single unit within a sentence, and they don't have a subject and a verb. So we've talked about this before. They can be verb phrases, noun phrases, prepositional phrases. So there's different categories and they function all together, if you like, but they don't have to have both a subject and a verb. For example, the girl in the red dress. Do you see a verb there? No, no verb. It's in fact a prepositional phrase. The girl is the noun. In the red dress, in is the preposition, and then another noun following it. So they're grouped together and we can call this a prepositional phrase. Another prepositional phrase, after the rain stopped. This time we have after the rain and then stopped, the verb there. So there's different variations of words that you can have within a phrase, but they can be grouped together. And that's what we're referring to when we talk about, for example, prepositional phrases. Okay, just another part of sentences to bear in mind. There are different types of sentences, and so just another part of sentences to bear in mind, there can be different types. So you can have declarative sentences, stating a fact or opinion. Interrogatives, we've talked about this in the tenses, asking a question. Imperatives, giving a command, or exclamatory sentences, expressing a strong emotion, say with an exclamation mark. So again, just something to bear in mind when we begin to talk about sentence structures. So let's look at an example for each of these. You can have a declarative sentence, the sun sets in the west. There we go, it's a fact, something that happens, it's a truth. An interrogative, did you finish your homework? So that's a question here. An imperative, please pass me the salt. That's a command, a request if you like. And the last type, exclamatory, what a beautiful day it is. So you see that exclamation mark there, conveying the emotion with this sentence. So you will use these in your writing, I'm sure, a mixture of all of them to talk about lots of different types of things and to show a range of emotions. So I'm sure you will use all 4 of these types of sentences in your writing. So, with all of that in mind then, what are the 4 types of sentence structure themselves? So now that we understand sentences, what goes into a sentence, what makes up a sentence, now we can think about the different types. So, the first type, simple sentences. What do we mean by that? Well, we are referring to one independent clause, usually with a subject and a verb. The graph illustrates the percentage of students on public transportation. So illustrates being the main verb there, the graph being the subject. Global warming is a serious environmental issue. Okay, so we've got 2 independent sentences. They don't need another sentence to make sense. They are fully complete on their own. They consist of a subject and a verb there, and objects of course, but we're just focusing on the subject and the verb, which makes it a simple sentence. What about a compound sentence now? So this is when we have 2 independent clauses, so just like what we've been looking at, joined by a coordinating conjunction. Okay, so we'll look at this in a separate video if you want to learn more about coordinating conjunctions. But words like and, but, or a semicolon. Okay, let's see this in action here. So, for example, the population has increased significantly, but the resources remain limited. Okay, so we've got the green indicating one independent clause, the blue the other, and then like glue, but joins them together, and we have this nice compound sentence here. And I should mention that these are all topics and types of sentences that you might want to write in the IELTS. It might be the topic that comes up. So these are great examples for you if you are practicing. Another one now, she completed her research paper, semicolon. Now she is preparing for the presentation. So you can see that they are 2 complete thoughts. They both have their own subject, their own verb, and they can either be connected with a semicolon as shown or with a coordinating conjunction here. So both of these sentences have equal weight, if you like. If you were to see a scale and people holding up, a person holding up these 2 sentences, they would be the same. Complex sentences, on the other hand, are not equal. They contain an independent clause and one or more dependent clauses. And in this case, they use a subordinating conjunction, which are different from coordinating. Words like although, because, and while. So the dependent clauses, remember, they don't have a complete thought. They need the independent clause to stand. They can't stand alone. So let's have a look at this and see how it differs. Although the economy has grown, income inequality has also widened. Okay, so you can see the blue here can stand alone, but we've added this dependent clause at the beginning with the subordinating conjunction although to introduce the sentence. So I think this is really important because complex and compound sentences can cause confusion, and I understand it's tricky to get our heads around it sometimes. So we can think of it as the independent clause being the main part, and then perhaps one or more dependent clauses attached to it. Always with compound or complex, always look for the independent clause, and then you can go from there and decide, okay, well, which type of sentence might this be? The survey, which was conducted last month, revealed important insights. Okay, so another way of looking at this is we can almost go in and take out, omit the green dependent clause. Would the blue sentence still make sense? The survey revealed important insights? Yes. So that is our independent clause here. We've just inserted with 2 commas a dependent clause between them. So that's something you can do as well with the subordinating conjunction which as well. Okay, so hopefully you can see how this is different from compound sentences. Compound, they are equal, they are like twins if you like. Complex sentences, you have one grown up here, the independent clause, and maybe one or more children that is dependent on that adult. So that's another way you can think about these sentences. Okay, so just to add another layer to this, this is the last one, and so we can put it all together and think about compound complex sentences. Okay, what does this mean? Well, you might guess from the name. This combines elements of both compound and complex sentences. So, in other words, you can have multiple independent clauses. So you can have 1, 2, 3, and at least one dependent clause. So you have to have one, but you can of course have more than one. Let's see this in action, and for this one, it is quite a long sentence for obvious reasons, so we're just going to look at one and break this one down. While some argue for stricter environmental regulations, others believe economic growth should take precedence, but finding a balance is challenging. So you might have some ideas here as to which sentences are the independent ones. Maybe you can spot the dependent one. There's a clue with a certain subordinating conjunction. That's always a good way to spot a dependent clause as well. Let's look at this in a bit more detail. So we've got our independent clauses, and we've got 2. So if you like 2 adults here. We've got others believe economic growth should take precedence, so that can stand alone. That doesn't need another sentence. Finding a balance is challenging. Again, we have our independent sentence, our clause if you like, connected by a coordinating conjunction but. So remember, they hold together sentences that are equal, like our balanced weights. Then what is not equal in the sentence, we have our dependent clause, and we've only got one in this one, while some argue for stricter environmental regulations. So if we were to take away our subordinating conjunction while and just have some argue for stricter environmental regulations, that would change to an independent clause, but we don't. That is not the situation we're in. We have while there, so that creates a dependent clause. It needs the other sentences to make sense, to be complete. Here we go. So we have while, it's dependent, it can't stand alone, it needs support. to form a complete thought. And then we're just focusing on while and but here. They're the connections, they're the glue. So coordinating conjunction but and subordinating conjunction while. The combination of independent and dependent clauses are connected by these conjunctions. And so we end up with a compound complex sentence. So it seems a bit daunting, and I understand that this type of sentence can be because it's quite long for obvious reasons, because you need at least 2 independent clauses. So it's going to be a longer sentence, but if you are able to break it down and really think about, okay, can this sentence stand alone? If it can, you can know that it's an independent clause. If it can't, then it must be a dependent clause. And then you can take it from there. Then that allows you to really fully understand what type of sentence it is. Okay, and this is relevant for IELTS. Why? Because in your writing section, you will want to use a variety of sentences. Don't feel like you have to always use a compound complex sentence. Actually, I think sometimes a really short, simple sentence is very effective in essay writing and in speech as well, but we're focusing on the writing today. You can really force home an argument by using a variety of sentences. That will show the examiner that you understand the sentences, you employ them and use them where they're relevant, and it just makes for a really nice essay to read and to write. Okay, so let's think about some practice then. We've got a sentence and it's up to us to decide what type of sentence it is. So, for example, the bar chart depicts the percentage of adults in different age groups who participated in regular physical activity in 2019. Oh, okay, it's quite long, but we want to figure out, okay, is it simple? A subject verb. Well, we've got the bar chart depicts. Is it compound, where we've got 2 equally weighted sentences? Do you remember our weights? That's our compound. And they are connected with our coordinating conjunctions like and, but, or. Is it complex? Is there one independent clause, maybe one dependent? Is it compound complex? More than one independent clause? One dependent clause minimum? Have a think. And then I'll do a big reveal. So this is in fact a simple sentence. It's one independent clause expressing a complete thought. There we go. So simple sentences can be a bit longer than you might first realise. And if we're not sure, we might think, oh, this is compound. Well, actually, it's all related to the one thought here. Okay, on the other hand, we can have this sentence. While the majority of respondents preferred online shopping, a significant number still opted for traditional brick and mortar stores. Okay, one word is a massive clue. It's a subordinating conjunction, and that should tell you what type of sentence this is. It's indeed complex. We've got one independent clause and one dependent clause with while. Okay, what about task 2? This is where you form your arguments. In conclusion, striking a balance between economic development and environmental sustainability is a complex challenge. Right, so we've got this word and. Does that make a difference here? Or is this still one complete thought? This would be one complete thought. So it's one independent clause that creates a clear statement here. Okay, so when we're talking about economic development and environmental sustainability, it's still part of the same argument, if you like. Another one, despite the government's efforts to curb air pollution, the issue persists, necessitating more comprehensive and immediate measures. We've got interesting use of commas here. We've got another interesting word, despite. What do we think about this one? Well, I would say this is a compound, complex sentence. Why? The issue persists is independent. It's one thought. Necessitating more comprehensive and immediate measures, also independent. We've got coordinating conjunction and a dependent clause. Despite the government's efforts to curb air pollution, introduced by this subordinating conjunction despite. So there is a lot going on here, so don't worry if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed by this, but just look out for those independent clauses where there's two, and then you can think, oh, this must be more than likely a compound complex sentence. And then the two independent clauses, then you can think about your dependent clauses. You can see a conjunction like despite, and this gives you a clue as to, that must be dependent. Okay, if you're writing a letter, you might write something like, I'm writing to express my concerns about the increasing traffic congestion in our city. The situation has worsened over the past few months, affecting the daily commute for many residents. While some suggest expanding public transportation, others propose implementing strict carpool regulations. Okay, a lot happening here, and it's difficult in a paragraph to perhaps see the different types of sentences. So if you can, if anything jumps out at you, that's great. If you can see complete thoughts, maybe some conjunctions, maybe interesting use of punctuation. Have a think and we'll go through each part. So, I'm writing to express my concerns about the increasing traffic congestion in our city. Okay, simple sentence, complete thought there. Next line, let's analyse. The situation has worsened over the past few months. That's an independent clause, that's a complete thought. Affecting the daily commute for many residents. That's a dependent clause. That needs the independent one to make sense. So we've got a complex sentence here. If you're ever unsure about whether it's an independent clause, if you were to replace the comma with a full stop, would it still make sense? In this situation, yes it would, so it's independent, that first part. Okay, what about the next one? While some suggest expanding public transportation, others propose implementing strict carpool regulations. So we've got another complex situation here. We've got an independent clause, others propose implementing strict carpool regulations, and our dependent clause with that while there, our subordinating conjunction. Okay, so well done for today. We've covered a lot, and it's really important to go over the basics so that when we get to these compound complex sentences, we understand what's going on. So I hope that's been really helpful for you, and you're welcome to use a variety of these sentences in your writing for IELTS and in general as well. Thank you so much for coming along. We'll see you next time.